Actually, I mean, my introduction to the offshore industry, I just worked on a ship, brand new ship, first one in the Navy had ever had, in which human factors engineering was involved in the contract. And it was dubbed the most sailor-friendly ship the Navy had ever built. And I thought that's the launching platform for bigger and better things. But I got interested in the offshore business. I was looking for something new, something different. I gave a talk 1990 at the Offshore Technology Conference, and I asked, why doesn't the offshore industry utilize people like me to help design rigs? And I gave 7 potential explanations. Maybe you don't know what ergonomics is. Maybe you don't think we are worth our salt. Maybe you don't think we are too expensive. Maybe. And all of those excuses are not valid. We've had 22 years. I'd worked on ships for 22 years by that time, and I knew, I knew that those excuses were not valid. There was a man in the audience, a fellow by the name of Frank Amato, who was director of HS&E for Shell Offshore. He came to me after my presentation, and he asked me, what can you do to make our workers safer and more productive? What can ergonomics do? What can human factors do? And you personally? And I said, I have no idea. I know nothing about the offshore industry. And he laughed, and he said, well, we don't know anything about human factors, so we're going to be starting together. And he invited me to come to New Orleans for a couple of days. I did. Sat down with the engineering staff there. We went over some of the drawings. They were underway at that time on a rig called Auger. It was the first floater, right, for Shell. And they asked me to review the drawings, layouts, etc. I got a call from him about a week after I was there, and he said, we'd like to offer you a contract for about 4 months. We will decide whether we think you're making a contribution to the enhanced safety and efficiency of our workers. And if we do, we'll extend your contract, and if not, we'll shake hands and part friends. That was his approach. I went down, I spent 4 months in Shell in New Orleans, and I didn't hear anything from them. So last day I had all my design criteria and everything that I used. I boxed it up, and I was walking out the door of the Shell office, One Shell Square in New Orleans. And Frank stuck his head out of the door and said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going home. I said, fine, but why are you taking all your stuff with you? And I said, nobody's said anything, so I assumed I flunked. And he said, oh no, we like what you're doing. And I was there 9 years. Wow. as a contractor for them. And during that time, other oil companies then began to hear about what we were doing at Shell. The Mineral Management Service at that time, heard, and I was invited over to MMS and lecture on human factors, and it just sort of blossomed, and I spent 27 years then doing ergonomics on offshore rigs around the world. Well, first of all, in 1988, the U.S. Navy, which I'd been working for, the Department of Defense, had a human engineering design standard. It had all the numbers, so many inches for having to work in this space and do this task, and so many inches of head clearance if you're so big, and so forth. Had all these numbers, and we've been using them on ships for quite a while, designing ships. The Congress decided that that was too expensive. They needed to cut down the price. So they ordered all of the Federal Department of Defense agencies to get rid of these design standards that they were sure were causing the problem. And the human factors engineering design standard was one of them. And so the U.S. Navy was just in the process of building a new ship called a SWAT, S-W-A-T-H. It's kind of like a catamaran. And they wanted human factors in there. So the Navy approached me and said, can you write us a new ergonomic design standard that will be acceptable to the commercial maritime world as well as for us? And I was given that contract, and I did write it. And it's still around now, and it's used worldwide, that standard is. So in that standard, there are lots of numbers, and you asked specifically. As an example, that standard, by the way, was and still is published by ASTM, ASTM 1166. And in that standard, we wrote criteria for head clearances, say, uh, depending on who the user was going to be. You know, that's the whole concept of human factors. You build around the user. And if the user is from Indochina, you know, you have little guys. If you want to look for the tallest seagoing population in the world, they come from Norway. So you say, okay, if the Norwegians are going to be manning this rig, I have to build bigger header clearances.
6'10".
Yeah, 6'4" actually was the maximum. So we build in the human factors business, we build from the 5th percentile to the 95th. 5th saying that for any particular body dimension, if you are a 5th percentile person, only 5% of the world's population is smaller than you are. If you're 95th, only 5% are larger. So we try to build, and this is true whether the car you drive or the kitchen sink you stand at or whatever, that we try to build it to fit 90% of the potential user. And so in the offshore industry, we started making, like on Auger, I started changing clearances, access sizes, steps, stairs, all different than had been on oil rigs before, based upon research that had been done. Stairs being a big one, because when I first went to Shell, they said, what do you want to work on? I said, I don't know. What accidents have you been having? What kind of things have happened that you're hurting your workers? And we went back and looked at 10 years worth of accident data from Shell, and one of the most predominant was falls on stairs. Yeah, and so I said, well, I have research data from a fellow, professor at Georgia Tech University, spent 25 years studying why people fall up and down stairs. We have dimensions he guarantees that if we use, we won't have anybody on your rigs falling. And so Shell said, fine, we'll go to that. And so those stairs went on Auger. And Auger was already kind of underway. Mars was the first one where we really had an opportunity to start with scratch. I was assigned to the Mars design team from the first day the team was put together. And so all the stairs on Mars, nobody falls down. And we kept records, and Shell had 27 serious falls where guys were in the hospital, permanently injured, in 3 cases killed. And we went back 10 years later after the stairs had been put in on Mars. Then came Ram Powell and Earth Sun, and we had 1 fall. So we were really pleased, and Shell was pleased. And in 1996, we had a conference, big first offshore oil technology conference in the world, dealing with human factors and who was doing it. So we had people from all over the world who came. And Shell had one of their chief engineers, Dan Godfrey, I think he was right. And Dan said, we're not, they asked, why are you doing this? People, it's one of the questions. So we're not doing it because we like Mr. Miller. We're doing it because we think he's contributing to the safety of our workers, and we're going to keep it. And they've had an ongoing ergonomics program at Shell ever since I instituted it in 1990, May of 1990.